Okay, we'll make a start there. So, hey everyone, welcome to the first of our Catapults Closing the Gap webinar series, where we're featuring industry-leading experts across the globe who are actively working to champion women in sports as well as showcasing women's sports. My name is Hannah Pitt and I'm a customer success specialist here at Catapult. And today we have Tom Drowley presenting on The Obstacle is the Way, preparing for the unique demands and challenges of Tokyo 2020. Tom has a wealth of experience working in performance and elite sport with previous roles in professional rugby, tennis, football and judo. Tom is currently in his 6th year at GB Hockey, having joined in 2015 prior to the Rio 2016 Games. Tom has taken the lead of this current Olympic cycle and will be leading them to Tokyo in a month's time. After Tom's presentation, there'll be time to ask some questions, so please use the Q&A feature, which you can be found at the bottom of your screen, to post any questions throughout the presentation so that Tom can answer these at the end. If you're ready, Tom, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Hannah. So thanks for listening to this presentation. As Hannah said, it's The Obstacle is the Way, preparing for the unique demands and challenges of Tokyo 2020. My name is Tom Drowley, and I'm a Senior S&C coach at the EIS, as Hannah just said. So for those not familiar with international field hockey, here is a brief overview of the nature of the sport and what the challenge will be at Tokyo in 4 weeks' time. So hockey is an incredibly fast-paced team sport. It's 60-minute matches split into 4 by 15-minute quarters. There's unlimited rolling subs. There are self-pass free hits, and by that, if you get fouled, you can take the ball on yourself without having to wait for anyone else. And there's no offside, so anywhere on the pitch a player can be passed to. It's on a synthetic water-based pitch, which may seem like a strange thing to bring up, but it means that there's very little friction between the stick and the pitch and the ball and the pitch, which means it's incredibly quick. There's 11 players per team, including the goalkeepers. Now, in 4 weeks' time, when we go to Tokyo, the format of the competition is we have 8 matches in 14 days. There are 5 matches in the group stage with 2 back-to-back sets of matches in that first week. And then there's 3 knockout matches in the second week, the quarterfinal, semi-final, and final. As people will probably know, Tokyo is going to be the single most physically demanding Olympics of all time because of its incredibly hot and humid environment. So the subject of this presentation is the physical preparation for the unique demands and challenges of Tokyo 2020. The theme is how the challenges and obstacles we faced during the 5-year cycle shaped and improved our preparation for the Olympics. So my story is about how competitive and program demands provide an opportunity to master and learn about scenarios and constraints which you will face again. The summation of the challenges you choose to take on and master become the foundations of an ever more resilient and consistent physical prep program. To support this, I'm going to present 3 major challenges and obstacles which I've faced during this cycle that have shaped our current practice, how those obstacles forced us to create effective solutions, the keys to succeeding within our women's program, and the legacy of the obstacles. The 3 major challenges are adaptable and individualized programs, utilizing the variance of an Olympic international calendar, and Tokyo 2.0 and the opportunity of COVID-19. Now, if there's anything you take from this presentation, the key message I hope you hear is that obstacles force you to do the fundamentals of physical preparation better and make your program resilient to even the biggest challenges. So on to the first major challenge in our quest to be the best physically prepared team at the London 2018 World Cup and Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games: adaptable and individualized physical programs. So in the aftermath of Rio 2016 and the gold medal winning performance, I caught up with Danny Kerry, who at the time was the head coach of the women's GB team, where he shared his vision for the physical preparation of the side in our attempts to medal again in 2018 and in 2020. His challenge was that the squad should have fleet of foot, be faster, win the race, but be just as durable and robust as the gold medal winning squad that just won gold. Shared hardship and group progressing to the same goals, but make it individualized. So just to clarify, they need to be just as durable, but faster than everyone else too. Make programs individualized and targeted, but have them doing it at the same time and with collective goals. So no pressure then. But this was music to my ears. I've got the head coach saying he actively wants a faster team who win races to repeat high intensity actions, but stay resilient and wear other teams down. As it says on the screen, challenge accepted. So with any challenge you take on, there are obstacles to success, and it was certainly no different with Danny's challenge to me. The photo you can see is the group that returned to training in January 2017 at the restart of our 2020 cycle. In addition to not having the same kit, this was a brand new squad with only 3 of the 16 from the gold medal winning squad, a number of brand new athletes and players returning to the programme in various levels of physical condition. Whilst I was mindful of Danny's challenge, we also had to quickly prepare the group to be able to survive and compete on international tours and prepare for tournament hockey in the summer. So other obstacles to success included the same, perhaps reduced resources with expanded ambitions and expectations, for example, staff turnover, infrequent physical performance assessments with slow turnaround results to programme decisions, often coming after physical blocks, so that the diagnostics didn't actually inform the programmes that the players did. A player group suspicious of physical assessments and a need to know why they are doing things, why they are being assessed, why we think the strategy we're employing will benefit them, why should they commit to what we've suggested. I think this is the same in any group, but particularly pronounced in this squad and in women's teams I've worked with. We also had a culture of durability in the players and the staff group, where grind and ability to keep going was valued highest, often at the expense of chasing explosiveness and speed. So what needed solving? Firstly, we needed to create a training and tournament durable group of players as soon as possible to be ready for the tours and tournaments quickly approaching. We needed to shift the physical preparation discourse to change the language and conversations around physical preparation in international hockey. And we needed to modify and streamline the use of diagnostics within GB women's hockey to support our new objectives and back up the messages we were sharing with the players and the coaches. So it's time to get to some solutions. In order to ensure the new group of athletes in their various physical states and years of experience were training and tournament ready as soon as possible, we created a streamlined system to deal with the known and long-standing fundamentals of training and tournament robustness. The system had full support service, multidisciplinary team collaboration and coordination. It was data-informed, logical and transparent in its decision-making processes. And it was the first step for any new or returning athlete, and also athletes with a change in their fundamental status. So just to sort of summarize what it shows on the left. Is the player healthy? Yes or no? What needs action? Is the player nutritionally sound? Yes or no? Do they need education or do they need a kick up the backside? Is lean body mass percentage in a good range? Yes or no? Or are there any underlying injury risks? And what is the status of the injury risk factors involved? We have a squad size of 25. In this 5-year cycle, we have worked with over 45 athletes, and this system has been integral in our work to make athletes safe and successful. On this slide are 4 subject areas where we needed to shift the discourse around what successful physical preparation is in hockey and set the foundations for messages that have come to underpin our entire physical approach at GB Women's Hockey. So firstly, robust and fast, not robust or fast. There was a prevailing belief that the two were mutually exclusive. This isn't true, but they needed to believe it and they needed to experience this. We wanted to focus our physical preparation around repeat speed ability. We had a group that valued repetition and durability, but not speed. So the focus became creating something worth recovering from rather than simply being able to repeat what you already had. Thirdly, we had players that were used to physical testing being used for selection decisions and a form of judgment. To write individualized and up-to-date programs, we needed to implement regular diagnostics and ongoing assessments. The discourse around assessment had to become diagnostics, not testing. And finally, in order to ensure the group had shared goals and being it together, we couldn't risk individualized programs impacting the togetherness and shared hardship of the group. So the message was squad goals, individual plans. On this slide are examples of email and presentation slides I used to help the players reflect on our 2017 preparation for 2 major international competitions, and build on the messaging around robust and fast and squad goals individual programs. On the left shows how far collectively the players had run in training, equivalent of London to Cairo, and the volume load they had collectively lifted in the gym, which was 13 times Boeing 747s. Despite their high volumes, the squad improved their speed, change direction, and jumping capabilities. For example, the group mean for counter movement jump peak power increased from 46 to 49 watts per kilo, and jump height had increased by over 10%. Both represented large effect sizes. On the right was a reminder that they had maintained their durability and remained successful on the international stage, as shown by their ability to win their last matches of grueling tournaments. In order to modify and streamline our use of performance diagnostics and to create a faster squad able to repeat high intensity actions, I created a hierarchical performance diagnostic system based around the development of maximum aerobic speed and repeat speed ability. The system was data informed, logical, and openly shared with athletes and staff for transparency, understanding, and trust in the process. We could use the system for short-term decision-making as well as long-term trajectory tracking, and we could signpost more effectively using a tiered diagnostic system so that programs reflected the most current state the athletes were in, and we were more efficient with our time between diagnostics to program decisions. The close temporal proximity of these outputs has proved important in player feedback and relevance, as well as coach interest in what has just happened. Players have fed back time and time again that they can see how the diagnostics led to programming decisions for them to improve in their own way. This is in line with the message of squad goals and individual programs. One of the most effective and rewarding parts of the system we've developed is the collaboration with Emma Gardner, our nutritionist, and Andrea First, our psychologist at the time, to make adaptation focus groups. Coordinating physical preparation and nutritional strategy amplifies and accelerates the outcomes of programs substantially. And this is one of the main benefits of these groups. Importantly, these groups also allow much more effective communication with subgroups of the playing squad to pass on detail and for them to support each other throughout the training and competitive process. How these groups were named, communicated, and how they live and breathe in our physical prep pro system is testament to the expertise of Emma and Andrea. The players have a higher quality product, they trust us to deliver, and feel much better supported as part of these groups than fighting for adaptations on their own and without specific focus on the adaptations they need most. This also comes back to our consistent messaging of diagnostics, not testing, squad goals, individual programs, and in it together. On this slide, we have two examples of the adaptation focus groups we now use. And in the top right is the desk we used to initially formulate these groups. It did wipe off eventually. So what is the legacy of tackling this particular obstacle, this challenge? So we have a consistent, coordinated, and highly effective fundamentals program. We've got a permanent shift in the physical preparation discourse. We also have an agile and consistent performance diagnostic system, which matches our philosophy and physical aspirations. And as important as anything else, we have an aligned MDT, or multidisciplinary team, coaching staff, and playing group. Through tackling the obstacle now over many years, apologies. Through tackling the obstacle over many years now, I've also learned that to embed new ideas and systems into an elite women's team, a system must be effective and well thought through, transparent and openly shared with both athletes and staff group. It must be aligned within the MDT. I can't stress that enough. It must be consistent, with change coming through iteration, not inconsistency. And it must be in line with the discourse within the group and within the staff. So we now move on to the second challenge I'll be presenting on, the challenge of utilising the variants of an international Olympic international calendar as we strive to optimise tournament preparedness and in-competition physical performance. Post-Rio, the international calendar was very consistent and well spaced out through 2017 and 2018. The formats were all very challenging and slightly varied, particularly the World Cup. but followed a format that we were familiar with at GB Hockey and had a good track record of doing well. The major tournaments are listed in the table on screen. As you can see, in 2017, we had the World League semi-finals and Europeans, where we won bronze by winning our last matches in both tournaments. In 2018, we had the Commonwealth Games, the London 2018 World Cup, which was our major focus, and later the Champions Trophy in China. On the graphic on screen, you can see the layout of the 2018-2019 hockey calendar and the introduction of a brand new competition called Pro League. Now, Pro League has 9 of the best teams in the world who play in a home and away league system. It's 1 match in each country and then you move on. Matches in similar parts of the world were attempted to be grouped together, so you had longer single tours. Importantly, we were playing as Great Britain in the Pro League, and there were increased ranking points for each game, so every game came with a lot of consequence. There were also additional obstacles, which were the Pro League was as Great Britain, the Euros was as England. We also reduced the squad size in November to December of 2018. So we actually had a smaller group to pick from, as well as Scottish and Welsh athletes joining the programme full time, which reduced our England squad size that we could pick from in the summer. Not a small matter, we also had a new head coach announced in January 2019, who joined us in New Zealand for the first game of the Pro League. So what needed solving? Sounds like a lot. Firstly, using the experiences we had already gained for the first major obstacle I presented on, we could work out what we didn't need to solve. We didn't need to solve how to make a fundamentals framework. We didn't need to solve how to peak for 1 match and match day routines, which we'd done for the World Cup in 2018. We also didn't need to solve how to create adaptable individualized programming. But what we did need to solve was how could we optimize our travel strategies? Could we take our performance program onto the road, and how well could we do that? And we'd need a new periodization model to cope with the Pro League and be ready for the Europeans in the summer. So firstly, looking at optimized travel strategies. In order to optimize our travel strategies, I worked closely with Luke Gupta, shown on the right, who is an expert on sleep and travel strategies at the IS, and now quite a big name in his field. Our jet lag strategy was simple but very effective. We proactively worked to ensure our travel logistics were aligned to our jet lag strategy, for example, flight selection and dates of travel. We used strategic Zeitgebers to favourably shift the athlete and staff's body clocks. For those interested, a Zeitgeber is a rhythmically occurring natural phenomenon which acts as a cue in the regulation of the body's circadian rhythms. We also coordinated trip schedules between departments, so meals and training times were conducive to our plans. As before, we had learned to invest in shifting the discourse around jet lag and travel before introducing our strategies, because it had tended to be about the negative aspects of travel. We want to be the best team in the world at traveling, and we also used positive language around seeking light, seeking darkness, and fun in the dark. It's all above board, I assure you. As we go into Tokyo in 4 weeks' time, we will be utilising these same strategies, which are now well tried and tested. Without going into laborious detail, which I assure you I can or would if I was given the chance, I can assure you we have jumped, squatted, run, stretched, and jumped again all over the world and in all kinds of different circumstances. Our mission was to be able to take our performance program on the road and still make progress in our physical development, and the athletes have been outstanding in their open-mindedness and application over the last 5 years. The bottom photo in the middle of the screen was taken in a place called Spooky Nuke in the USA. Honestly, one of the strangest places I've been, and the location of a story which I think shows how the players had bought in, understood, and lived and breathed what we were trying to do. So I was sitting at dinner, trying to get some peace and quiet, which is normal for me, when 2 of the players approached me to ask me about the next day's schedule. They'd spotted that we had a late flight the next day to Argentina and that we had no meetings or commitments the next morning. They asked if the players in the aerobic and lean body mass 1 adaptation focus groups could use that time to do an extra aerobic conditioning session. They even suggested the session And they even suggested the session they should do and asked if I was happy with this. Now, regretfully, my first reaction was defensive. I'm the S&C coach, and I would have spotted that if there was an opportunity for this. Well, fact is I hadn't. And I realized that through our adaptation focus groups and investment in transparency and player understanding, that I now had 25 S&C coaches in the squad. It was equally humbling and fantastic at the same time. So due to spacing and the sequence of the pre-Pro League hockey calendar, we had quite a well-established and formulaic periodisation strategy. Pro League offered a new challenge and a way of utilising our performance diagnostics and adaptation focus groups to leverage on this new calendar. We used our performance diagnostics in line with our diagnostics not testing mantra to create individualized programs based on where they were at that moment in time. It also provided us with evidence alongside training and monitoring data of the efficacy and effectiveness of our physical prep program throughout the year. During Pro League, we biased, wait for that to come up. During Pro League, we biased single match preparation and creating explosive actions and events whilst maintaining our fundamentals. Post-Pro League, we would assess diagnostics and bias programs which develop the ability to complete 5 matches in 7 days, which is what we would have to do at the Euros. After a few weeks off, the players would then embark on a maximum aerobic speed block conditioning phase to ensure the 2 matches we had to play for our Olympic qualification, we could attack knowing we were fast, durable, and can play with intensity. This new style of yearly periodization meant we had more flex and experience of new strategies that work well with our squad. So what's the legacy of tackling this obstacle? Well, tackling this obstacle meant we had well-rehearsed and interrogated travel strategies. We had a performance program that could be run anywhere, anytime, and we actually now had a new and tested periodization model that we knew was effective. So as you can see from this second challenge I've presented on the solutions from the first obstacle, creating adaptable and individualized physical programs, the solutions from the first obstacle are now also a major part of the solution for how we utilize the variants of the international calendar. This shows how the summation of the challenges you choose to take on and master become the foundations of an ever more resilient and consistent physical preparation program. So we now move on to the third and final major obstacle, Tokyo 2.0, and the opportunity of COVID-19, and the challenge of being the best physically prepared team at the postponed Tokyo 2020 Olympics. So the obstacles to success, I think for all of us were quite clear, but I will go through them anyway. We had complete uncertainty. We were working from home, and we had an indefinite time not able to train. Our base at Bisham Abbey was completely closed, and we didn't know when we would be back and what we'd be allowed to use. Secondly, the playing group, we had a highly anxious playing group, used to detailed plans, and now just having to go with the flow in this completely uncertain time. We also, due to COVID and players' attitudes during this time, which was completely fine, had athletes in very different physical conditions. The other thing that COVID threw up as we started to progress through lockdown was that we realised we had absolutely no international or domestic hockey calendar. We knew that the Tokyo Games had been postponed, and we would have to prep for the Tokyo environment with no travel potentially in the whole 12-month period leading up to the Olympics, which was a pretty imposing proposition. It's important to note how perception and looking for opportunities within challenges is a vital part of turning obstacles into paths to success. And the opportunities of COVID-19 were that we had this unique opportunity to review, improve, and have a second chance at our Olympic prep. We also had, because we'd had a lot of new players during the cycle, as I said, we had 45 players that we worked with over the cycle. We had an extra year to work with the new players that had joined us in the last 1 to 2 years. We also had time for technical and tactical development with our new coaching team. Although Mark had joined us at the beginning of 2019, we'd had such a congested calendar that actually this gave us a great opportunity to really embed his philosophy and work with our new coaching teams. We also had new assistant coaches. The lack of the international calendar also gave us real autonomy over our preparation schedule. We could do what we wanted within the realms of what the three gentlemen on the left allowed us to do. We also had a chance to use our amazing facilities to our advantage. Bisham Abbey is an incredible facility, and we have a lot of amazing staff that work at Bisham Abbey with hockey. And because now we weren't now going to be on the road, we could really leverage on that and use that to our advantage over other nations that might not have that at their disposal. So it really was an amazing opportunity to be able to review, improve, and have a second chance at preparing for the Olympics after our first attempt. In order to maximise this opportunity and make the most of the enforced time working from home over the summer, myself and the rest of the women's physical prep team undertook a thorough pre-mortem of the games as if they had happened. The process began by sharing all our potential failures openly as a group, asking, we failed physically at the Olympic Games, why? I then categorised and prioritised these for a discussion on our biggest threats. And next, we conducted reality checks about what the real situation was about these perceived threats, before finally making action plans and running project management plans in order to see through what we discovered. This process took place from April until August, and honestly, at points it felt very difficult and incredibly tedious. But we have real tangible outcomes from this process. We showed openness and transparency by sharing the threats that we'd identified and plans, and the plans we put together. We gained trust and buy-in from players, coaches, and the multidisciplinary team. One of the areas we felt from this pre-mortem that could have been a threat to our Olympic success if it had happened last year was ensuring the squad is capable of delivering 8 matches in 14 days in the heat and humidity of Tokyo. In order to establish the reality of this perceived threat, we wanted to dig deeper. So on screen is a spider diagram where we explored what we already knew about 8 and 14 and where the gaps in our knowledge were. Using all of the experiences we had from utilising the variants of the international calendar, the second obstacle we spoke about, we already knew a huge amount about the demands we would face at the Olympics. Firstly, in the group stage. So as you can see in the diagram on the left, in the light blue box, you've got the group stage, and to the left you have 5 and 7, and which basically is the tournaments where we've played or experienced 5 matches in 7 days. So at the Euros, we have 5 matches in 7 days, and we've literally just completed that in the last few weeks. We also have the Champs Trophy, which is 6 matches in 9 days. We also have experienced back-to-back matches, which, when we go to the Olympics, we'll face firstly Germany, and then the next day we'll face South Africa. Well, we've done that in the Pro League. We did that in Olympic qualifiers. We just did it in the Euros, and we do it in training with our Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday split of the week. We also know from the group stage and the knockout stages what we need to do to prepare for 1-in-1. And by that, I mean preparing for a single match. So in the Pro League, we prepare for matches and we're fresh. We go into that match, we're trying to peak for that match day on the weekend. At the Euros, you have 1 match when you're fatigued. And at training, we have single training days when we're both fresh and fatigued. So we know quite a lot about this. Also in the knockout stages, we know what it is to play must-win and shootout games. So we've had that in the Pro League, we've had that in the Euros, we had that in the Commonwealth semi-finals, and then also in bronze medal match, for example. What we also knew was about our opponents. So using the diagnostic systems we had created alongside the GPS and monitoring data, we also had great knowledge about the opponents we were going to play. And as you can see in the group stages, we know our opponents, we know our GPS totals and rates, we know the internal load, we also know the external load. And by internal load, I mean RPE, rating of perceived exertion. We also know how the players respond when we play these big teams, and we know what it takes to win. In knockout stages, we have a good idea of who we will play and what the demands are. But also through everything we've done, we also know a huge amount about the players in our squad. We know about the combinations of different players. We know about individual players in different positions and against different opponents, etc., etc. The list goes on. What we didn't know so well was how this group would cope in week 4 of the Olympic tour, when we needed to win the quarterfinal, the semi-final, and the final. That's represented by the purple box in the bottom left. We also didn't know how the overall experience would impact most of our squad. The vast majority of our squad have never been to the Olympic Games. So this includes how the mental and emotional load of such a big event against the best teams in the world would impact them. And this formed the basis of what we needed to find out in our second attempt at preparing for the Olympics. So how do we bring this all together to create a plan for the postponed games with the huge obstacles of COVID-19? In May last year, I created this themed macro plan with the intention of trying to add some clarity and direction to what appeared to be an incredibly difficult year to navigate. What it became was the anchor for my planning. It was an anchor for MDT alignment and communication, and a way to share with the athletes what we were going to be doing at each point in the year. The key to the plan was that the what and when of the plan would stay consistent, but the how and where would have to be dictated by COVID. So just looking at the plan, the best way I can describe this is by using this as the analogy I've got is for when you go to university, the different years at university. So firstly, during lockdown, we tried to support people with individual support and squad connection, and that speaks for itself. That was about us just making sure that physically and mentally the squad were in a good place. But as we go into September and we move into the individual performance phase, this is where you're looking at in terms of like the first year at university, where everyone's come to the same course, but everyone's come having done different A-levels or different subjects before they arrived. So actually that first year, you need to bring everyone up to the same level. And that's where we used our performance diagnostics to provide individualized programs so that we had the squad in a very similar place by the end of December, moving into January. Then when we were in January, we moved on to the squad performance phase. And this is basically like the second year at university, when actually everyone's done the same units, everyone's up to speed, but now what you need to do is really learn together and accelerate and start to specialize, but still with broad themes. That then moved on into Olympic prep and competition, which, excuse me for extending the analogy, but it's like the third year at university. You're really starting to specialize, you're starting to go into your role, and you're starting to have a really clear idea based on what your role is and how you're going to do it, based on what you did in year 1 and year 2. And Olympic execution, I mean, it speaks for itself, but you could see that as dissertation. It's your moment where you literally need to shine. You need to put all of your knowledge and experience into one moment. So this is an example of a slide from a presentation to the playing squad as we transition from the end of the individual performance phase into the squad performance phase. So this was done in December, and we were going to come back together in January. So we talked about in the squad performance phase when we came back together, training and competing as the squad we want to be at the Euros and the Olympics. Everything we are going to do needs to be at the intensity of international match play and above that. We need to be able to survive and thrive in the volume of work equivalent to and above 8 matches in 13 days. So this particular point is where you can see how we started to bring what we learned in the pre-mortem into our planning. We now had specific blocks where we did 4-week blocks of work, which were over and above the demands of 8 matches in 13 or 14 days. The next bullet point, to do this as a squad, individually, we have to be in outstanding shape. And so we were trying to say to them, look, we are setting this up with your work so far from September to now, and this is what you're going to be working for over Christmas. So hopefully that gives you a flavor of how we tried to bring it to life. And these communication strategies were incredibly important. And the consistency of language and returning to consistent themes throughout the year has proved to be a real an incredibly important point, as I've just said. So what is the legacy of this third and final obstacle? Well, time will tell. One thing is for certain from all this, for this year and what I presented in this final third obstacle, is that providing long-term clarity of the objectives and the strategies you'll be following, regardless of what might happen in terms of the how and the where, as I spoke about before, is something I'll continue to do from this point onwards, whether COVID's around or not. It's been incredibly useful, and I think within a women's squad, it's an incredibly powerful thing to be able to draw on. So to close, the numerous and varied obstacles we faced did not impede our Olympic preparation. They shaped it, they improved it, and they improved us as practitioners. And I hope through everything that I've said in this presentation, that the key message you take away from it is that the obstacles you face force you to do the fundamentals of physical preparation better and make your program resilient to even the biggest challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. That was really fascinating. We've got a few questions coming in. For everyone else listening, if you've got a question for Tom, please drop it in the Q&A box, which can be found at the bottom of your screen. I think you can be anonymous in that, so yeah, don't worry about it. I'm sure Tom will be happy to answer any questions. So to kick off, the first question, Tom, is more about your career. Can you talk us through your career leading into your time with working at England and GB hockey?
It sounds like a setup to put my CV out there. Starting with university, I'm a graduate of the University of Bath. I did my undergrad there, and I did a degree in sport and exercise science with a sandwich year. So I spent a year at Auckland Rugby as an intern, and had an incredibly good year out there learning, and then came back for my fourth year where I could put what I'd learned into then my studies, which really I found a really inspiring thing to do. Then finished university thinking I was the best S&C coach in the world after my 1 year as an intern, and realised that no one wanted to employ me. So quite quickly signed up for a master's at Loughborough. So I did sports science masters at Loughborough University, where I don't know if he's listening, but I worked with a guy called Bob Smith, who actually ignored my application until I went to see him, and then I got the role at the last second, and I worked with the Loughborough men's hockey team for that year, which actually contained a huge number of players that are now in the GB men's squad. I didn't work with the women's squad then, which would have meant I worked with the athletes I'm currently with. And then moved out of that, got a job at Gloucester Rugby as the number 3 there. And to be frank with people, I got paid peanuts and was perfectly happy with that, because in sport, you've just got to get yourself in there, and you've got to be getting experience. And I had 2 great years working under Barney Allen and Nick Lumley, who's now at Edinburgh Rugby, before moving on to Team Bath. And I worked in a tennis academy, again underneath Bob Smith. So you can see the cyclical pattern of what goes on in sport, or in my career. And I also worked with Southampton Football Academy, that had a satellite academy based at Bath. And then I went on to be lead of department there and worked in TAS. And particularly with my time in tennis and my time at TAS and in the judo program that I then worked with, I started to work more and more with female athletes, and had started to get much more experience of the consistencies with male athletes, but also the different ways of coaching, and also the incredible heights that they could reach in their physical prep and what they did. And then I was lucky enough to get a role supporting the 2 programs before Rio 2016, working under Andy Hudson and Ben Rosenblatt, where I learned a huge amount. 2 incredibly interesting, driven, intelligent guys who then set me up hopefully well to then lead the women's program now, as I have done for the last 5 years.
Nice. Do you think working in such a broad range of sports has sort of really helped, rather than maybe just focusing on one sport and staying in that for multiple years?
Look, there's so many different paths. I think the key thing is that you work out what the advantages. Again, look at obstacle is the way. I know it's cheesy. Everyone's like, sort of here's Ryan Holiday talking about obstacle is the way and making the most of things. You need to make the most of the circumstances you have in front of you. If you have an issue or you have something that becomes available to you, well, challenge the issue and take advantage of things in front of you and make your own path in your career. I think people that stayed in rugby, for example, there'll be some fantastic S&C coaches there who will have benefited from being in one environment for a long period of time and seeing it evolve. I think I've taken advantage of the fact that I've worked with lots of different athletes, lots of head coaches, lots of assistant coaches, lots of physios, lots of sports scientists. And so, it's put me where I am now. But I honestly, I'm not saying this because this is the webinar. I think working in women's sport has honestly forced me to become a far more considerate and far more well-rounded practitioner. Whereas if you compared me to the practitioner that worked in rugby, where I could herd overgrown teenagers into different rooms, I'm a very different person, a very different coach now.
Thank you, Tom. That was fascinating. We've got another question sort of more relating to the preparation for Tokyo. So how are you preparing for the heat in Tokyo? So you mentioned it in your presentation, that that's a big aspect of this competition, but how are you going about preparing for that?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because I didn't touch on the presentation because there's so much information. We obviously had a plan that we were going to try and fulfill in 2019, going into 2020, going to last year. So we actually conducted a full heat chamber-based heat acclimation process at Bisham Abbey in November, December of 2019. And we did this for a couple of reasons. One, we wanted to try out hockey-specific training in heat chamber and see if it provided an adequate stimulus for adaptation to heat and humidity. We also were going on the idea and the research. So Brighton have done a huge amount of work for British Sport, Brighton University, put together this heat pack, but also presented to us and the physiology team about how we could take on this challenge. And one of the things they spoke about, which really interested me, was, I don't think this is necessarily the right terminology, but almost like a metabolic memory, in terms of once you've done a heat acclimation process, of course, there is a deacclimation process afterwards. But each time you go back into it, it's quicker and it's potentially more impactful. So what we were trying to do in 2019 was to expose players in November, use then our exposure on the road at PROLEAGUE to, like we went to Australia, to then get another heat stimulus and heat adaptation in situ out there. And then we had a plan to go to South Africa to do a heat-based trip there. That was cancelled because of COVID. So what we've had to do this year, is this, just to check, this is making sense? Because in my mind, I can see the whole plan. So Hannah, please let me know if yeah, sweet. So this year, what we've had to do is we can't travel. And we've had 2 trips so far this year cancelled. Our trip to Spain was cancelled the day before we went to Spain. And our trip to Malaysia in April was cancelled the morning of the flight. So we've, again, obstacles the way. I know it's cheesy, but at that point we had to go, right, what the hell are we going to do? And Liz Boycott-Brown and Jade Ward, based back at Bisham, did an absolutely amazing job of setting up a home base. So I won't talk through it in detail because there's still a chance that people listening could use it before Tokyo, but a home-based acclimation. And what we've done is we've familiarised the athletes with the processes that we're using in a COVID-safe way. And honestly, it looks like a scene out of ET. And we've tried out our cooling methods in the tents, or in the methods that we're using. And we have, we now are going to embark on a week-long heat acclimation process next week, led by the physiology department, in and around our training. So that'll be 4 to 5 weeks out. And in the weeks building up, so that we don't have too much of a deacclimation, we'll use passive heat acclimation methods such as exercising straight and getting straight into hot baths. And then also we've got a 2-week prep camp and holding camp when we're out in Tokyo.
Excellent. Looking forward to hearing more about that, maybe post-Tokyo, and maybe you can share those processes in more detail.
Yeah, that'd be great.
We've got a question here from Sean Harris. He says, you mentioned seek light and seek dark. Can you expand on what that means?
Yeah, so this is based around the strategic zeitgeibers. I mean, honestly, I think I put one of the slides, or put on the slide about Luke Gupta. He's done podcasts, multiple now. He seems to be getting his name out there, which is brilliant. He is far more knowledgeable on this than me. What I've done is I've taken the pragmatic approach and found solutions and plans based on the advice that he's given. But these zeitgeibers are basically, like I say, shifts in circadian rhythm that we can try and manipulate, so natural shifts in it. Now, if we all have a point in the evening or point while we're sleeping, which is our least physiologically active, our body temperature is at its coolest, and that's perfectly natural. That's what we want. When we travel east, that least physiologically active period sits right in the middle of the bloody day. And what you need to do, or what you can do, depending on where you are in the world, is use light exposure either just before or just after that physiologically most inactive point, or yes, that point, to shift it in different directions. So if you put it just after, so like in Tokyo, what we'll do is we will seek darkness in the morning. So that means no direct sunlight, trying to avoid screens, trying to avoid also social zeitgeibers like social interaction or getting any form of stimulation in the morning. And what we'll try and do is then, as soon as we hit that physiologically least active point, we'll then get sunlight to try and shunt that further and further into the morning. And that takes, it's a really simple process if you're doing it on your own. It's much harder to do in practice because the players really have to buy in, because the temptation is the whole thing of, oh, well, let's go on local time. And it's lovely outside, and let's go out and walk for a walk. And we've really seen problems when we have got direct sunlight prior to the point we wanted, and it's just caused a real discrepancy within the group. So seek darkness is where basically either you're outside, or when we're in airports, you wear sunglasses and stay out of the light. It also means close the curtains in your room and stay in the darkness. Fun in the dark, again, lights all above board. But that is basically, if we're on a trip and we want to seek darkness in the evenings, what we'll do is have a quiz, or we'll have a fun activity in the evening, so we keep people awake so that they can resist the urge to go to sleep at that point. So yeah, there's heaps. But by far the biggest thing you can do for any of your jet lag strategies have alignment and commitment to the process from everyone involved, especially the head coach.
Sounds like you've got a great culture anyway, so I'm sure those processes are much easier with the culture that you've been alongside everyone else have been able to develop. Moving on to the next question, can you talk about your performance diagnostics / tests that you use, and how difficult was this to carry out with all the travel that you did during the Pro League? That's from Matthew Anderson.
Good question, big question. So can you repeat the first one, bit of it again?
Yep, so the first bit is, can you talk more about the performance diagnostics and tests that you've used? I'm getting attacked by a fly here, sorry. And then how difficult was this to carry out with all the travel you did? So what tests?
Yeah, no, great question. So if you look at Dave Hamilton's chapter in high intensity interval training, Mike Bichet and Paul Larson's book, he gives a really good summary of the historical diagnostics that we use in hockey. Because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants in terms of what came before me at hockey. And one of the things we had very well established, very well run, and very consistent diagnostics, which is we use, it might change, but currently we use the 30-15 and have done for a long period of time, which is our gauge of maximum aerobic speed. But also the combination of maximum aerobic speed with turning efficiency and acceleration. So we use that. We did have a period where we used the yo-yo for a while, but what I don't like about the yo-yo compared to 30-15 is you can't program from it. You can't prescribe maximum aerobic speeds or thresholds for training sessions that you do. The next thing we do is repeat speed ability. So that is a 20-meter shuttle. So out 20 meters, back 20 meters, as fast as you possibly can on a 30-second rolling clock. And again, this is described in Dave's chapter. I think he even calls it the Hamilton RSA test, which is some claim. Yeah, we do that. And from that, we take the fastest time. So that's one of our tier 1 diagnostics, the fastest time people can achieve. The mean time for the 8 reps that they do. I think Dave used to do 6, we now do 8. And also we look at fatigue index, but the key shift in mindset with what I spoke about, the shift in discourse, is that we really focus now on creating something worth recovering from. So making your fastest effort really fast or faster, rather than just trying to hold on. A slow player will get beaten to the ball by a tired fast player every single time. So that's a bit of a shift in mindset, but that's our test. We then also have linear speed diagnostics. So we now just do 10 meters, and then we have a radar gun so that we can get horizontal force velocity data based on the work of JB Moon and Sam Mazzino and that lot, Matt Cross as well. So look, there's so many, and we've got body comps that are done with skin folds and muscle girth, etc., etc. On the road, the challenge became the ability to use the technology that we had back at Bisham was very hard. But what we could do is take our mobile force decks on the road with us. What we could also do is use training as testing throughout the year. So we did limit our expectations when we were on a particularly busy trip. But what we could do when we came back to base was, rather than doing a full performance diagnostics block where we couldn't play hockey, we could do sessions like our run fast, jump high, chase numbers session, where we use training as testing. We get the girls to chase and go after performance scores, which one provides a good stimulus for them to adapt, but also gives us really good monitoring of how they're progressing over time. So yes, Pro League was tricky, but there were aspects, and hence why we went after the create bit and the fastest efforts, because actually with the force decks that we had out there, we could track peak power and jump capability, and we could also use GPS to look at how they were getting on in matches.
Thank you, Tom. I think we've got time for a couple more. First one is, how do you manage body's fatigue when playing so many games in so few days? So I think that might be recovery strategies that you've been.
Yeah, so I've got a bit of a different take on all this. I think the first thing people look to is, what's your recovery strategies? But Tim Gabbett, with the acute chronic workload and injuries, is getting a bit of heat at the moment, it seems, especially on Twitter. However, the one thing that's fantastic from what that guy brought into play and into our mindsets is that you can't spike if you're already at the ceiling. And you can't have a spike in training if what you're doing you're used to. So the biggest thing for us is that, and like I spoke about in the presentation, around knowing the demands of 8 and 13 or 8 and 14, or knowing the demands of 5 matches in 7 days of the Euros. Well, we have a training week where we do 5 days, 5 hard training days in 7 days, and we add double sessions in there, and we have gym sessions, and we have speed sessions, and we've organized the week in a logical way so that we have this almost conjugate parallel approach where different aspects of physicality are being worked through all the time. But it also means when we get to competition, the only additional stress is the mental stress of being in competition. But actually, you look at our RP monitoring recently from the Euros, it's far, far less than what we experience in a normal week, and especially over 4 weeks. So in this year, we've done 4-week blocks where we peaked in the intensity and volumes of work in the 4th week. So a 1 week competition at the Euros of 5 and 7 at Tokyo, the girls are eat it up, and they've shown that again and again. If anything, we back ourselves when we have the second game, because we will recover better than anyone else. Yes, we do recovery strategies, but the main thing is we're battle hardened to that, and we prepare for that.
Makes sense. On one of your slides, you suggested that maybe you failed to physically prepare for Tokyo 2020, I guess version 1. What made you, what was the reasonings for deciding that? What did you use to sort of come to that conclusion?
So I work with a guy called A.D. Sheriff. I apologize if I can't pronounce his name wrong. And we talk about various things in terms of leadership and communication strategies and bits of that. And another thing that he's big on with his work, both in sport and in corporate, in business, is the use of a pre-mortem as a tool to have foresight over the things that might go wrong. If you have foresight and you already predict what could go wrong, you can actually see what you already have control of. And it's quite a liberating experience. It's quite a horrific thing to go through, in terms of sitting down and the other S&C coach in the department telling me all the ways that I'd let the program down in the 4 years was pretty humbling. But the open attitude to basically saying, look, let's just imagine. So it's not that I was whipping myself saying, oh no, I've done everything wrong. It was more an open and proactive attitude to say, right, if we got to August the 9th last year and physically we'd failed, what would have gone wrong? What could we already predict would have gone wrong? And as soon as you do that, you start to then safeguard against all the problems you would have had. You can also go, well, that's a major problem. We need to do something about that. But you can also identify things that we almost consider a paper wall issues. We're actually going, that's a perception issue. That's not actually a problem. So you also, through that process, although it sounds incredibly negative, you start to realize the major strengths of your program, and you take power back in terms of being able to preempt and fix the things that haven't actually gone wrong yet. And it's a mindset that we've taken to everything we do now. So I am still saying on August the 9th this year, or on finals day of the Olympics, we physically didn't step up to the mark. What went wrong? And if you take that from a macro point of view, but also a micro point of view, you can really get on the front foot in how you take on challenges, and suddenly you can see it as the game that it is, and it's quite fun. But you don't need to be at the mercy of it. You can take a bit of control.
Yeah, I guess, like you say, there's not many opportunities, right, where you're preparing for something and it doesn't go on, like the version 1 of the Olympics. So to have that ability to actually step back and sort of review your process is probably sort of, yeah, I guess most teams would probably like that opportunity, because sometimes you get stuck in a bubble, right? The fixtures come thick and fast. You don't get a chance to reflect until the end of the season. And then by then, sometimes it's a little bit too late.
We've also got incredible outcome bias. Whereas what this review had was we hadn't had the Olympics. Things hadn't gone wrong. And there's so many things that can go wrong. It's such a complex environment. So yeah, it's I think it's something that we should all do prior to events rather than after the event. But something will always go wrong. All the best plans, like Mike Tyson would say, everyone's got a plan to get punched in the face. I had a great plan for Malaysia. It got cancelled the morning of the flight, and we had to make a new 7-week block in the build up to the Euros in an afternoon. Even though we had plan B, we didn't actually think plan B would happen because we were literally about to go on our flight. So, you know, everything goes wrong, but you don't have to be at the mercy of it. You can take some proactive steps.
Thank you. I will finish off with the last question, and then I think we've managed to get through all of them. So what were some of the most instrumental nutritional strategies that you have implemented, or changes you've made to individual or group nutrition?
So I don't think it's a matter of changing much. I don't know if anyone on this call has worked with Emma Gardner. She's currently our nutritionist in the women's program, but also for England cricket men's team. And she just does a fantastic job. She's a really, really good nutritionist. And her mantra is about doing the basics well. It's not about the latest supplement. It's not about, what the newest research says, or this thing that could give you 0.25%. It's about the basics done well, incredibly consistently, and with the athlete's health and well-being at the center of everything she does. So that was already in place. There's nothing changed there. The biggest thing that me and Emma have done together is and it's I will pat ourselves on the back for this, is that, and I'm really proud of this, is that people talk about the physical prep program, Tom and Emma's physical prep program. So when people talk about physical prep within women's hockey, it's S&C and nutrition. And that's probably the biggest change we've had, is that the two, especially with the adaptation focus groups, it's a practical way of informing the players about how they can improve their planning, their doing, and adapting to sessions based on their nutritional and performance habits.
Thank you. I think we'll finish up there. Tom, you've given really good detailed answers to all of those questions. Thank you for joining us, Tom, for kicking off the first of our series. For everyone listening, at the same time tomorrow, we have got Cheryl Cox joining us. She's currently at University of California, Berkeley, as the strength and conditioning coach and sports science operations. So I'm sure she'll give another fascinating presentation. Thank you for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you all on tomorrow.